The Bogosity Podcast, early and ad-free. Become a subscriber at Patreon, Subscribestar, or Discord. Use the links at donate.bogosity.tv.
Welcome to the Bogosity Podcast for the week of August 17, 2025. The podcast that's got a lot of pretty boys that it calls friends. This is your host, Shane Killian. Let's dentate the news of the bogus. So we've got more people whining about video games being addictive. Thankfully, we've got a court that realizes that this doesn't overrule the First Amendment. In the case of Carey Courtright v. Epic Games, the mother of a 12-year-old claims that games are made in a way that creates and sustains addiction in users. It's the usual crap. Games cause the brain to produce dopamine, which happens every time you do something you enjoy. It provides a sense of accomplishment through milestones, which create endorphins and serotonin. Those relieve stress and give you a sense of well-being. They can provide an escape method to avoid life issues. In other words, like all addictions, this is a form of self-medication, where people with anxiety, depression, ADHD, or who have experienced traumatic events can bring the levels of dopamine, endorphins, and serotonins back up to normal levels. But as usual, there seems to be no curiosity whatsoever about what the underlying issue might be, and just call it video game addiction or internet gaming disorder or whatever. But that seems to be the method of 21st century medicine. Zero in on just one diagnosis, which is quite often a symptom and not the real problem. In this case, District Court Judge Brian C. Wimes had a problem with that. Citing the Supreme Court's Sullivan decision, he ruled, "The First Amendment to the United States Constitution limits the scope of tort liability by preventing recovery in cases where plaintiffs seek to hold defendants liable for protected conduct. Speech additionally receives the same level of protection whether the speaker seeks financial profit or not. Video games communicate ideas and even social messages through many familiar literary devices, such as characters, dialogue, plot, and music, and through features distinctive to the medium. Where a plaintiff seeks to hold a video game developer liable for the content of their products, strict scrutiny applies." In other words, if you want to sue a gaming company for this, it has to be about something other than the content of the game. Something the plaintiff was well aware of, since she claims to be targeting non-expressive conduct instead of content. But Judge Wimes ruled, "Here, the developer defendants create video games, which are entitled to First Amendment protection as a whole, not in a piecemeal manner like social media platforms. Plaintiff's argument that this case is about conduct, not content, is unpersuasive. Plaintiff alleges the developer defendants' video games are defective because they have addictive features. Plaintiff's claims, in essence, seek to hold the developer defendants liable because their video games are made too entertaining by these defective elements. This is content-based liability that is not permitted. To prohibit such a broad category of video game features would strongly stifle development, as game developers would fear that any new game feature that users find attractive could result in significant financial liability. The chilling effect on protected expression would be broad, even for minors. In the end, speech cannot be restricted simply because it is upsetting or arouses contempt, or where its content causes significant emotional distress. Here, all of plaintiffs' claims run afoul of the First Amendment. The theories of liability brought against the developer defendants would have powerful chilling effects and are far from narrowly tailored. The judge dismissed the case without prejudice. "Lady, there's something wrong with your kid. I'm sorry that that's the case, but you need to stop finding other people to blame and work with your kid's doctor, therapist, psychiatrist, or even neurologist to figure out what it is. I have 2 children that I raised to adulthood. one with moderately severe autism and the other with an anxiety disorder. I know all about wanting an easy solution. I empathize very well with desperately looking for someone or something to blame for it. But as hard as it is to take, this is the advice that's best for your kid, which should be paramount in your mind. Drop this bullshit lawsuit, take control of your child's life, and figure out what the problem is and how to treat it or manage it. One parent to another, doing that will be worth more than any amount of money you could ever be awarded in a lawsuit.
Presenting the greatest game this side of Yugoth. You are H.P. Lovecraft's cat, and your name is Nick. Right. We can't say that on a podcast. Well, anyway, that's the point. Your name is a joke to him. So now, you are out for revenge. Using the Necronomicon, you come to the present day to buy a gun to go vanquish him once and for all. But the Necronomicon is devious, and it summoned Lovecraft's monsters as well. Now, in a crumbling world, you must fight for the revenge you seek. Fight monsters, gain allies, buy guns and armor for yourself and your team. Defeat the bosses of each level. Then get your revenge against Lovecraft himself. Play Lovecraft's cat. The link is at cat.bogosity.tv. Yeah, we're doing cat.bogosity.tv, not that other one. What, you want me to get kicked off the internet or something?
None of us can deny that there's something creepy about someone who wants to spy on us all the time. So why is it less creepy when the one doing the spying is the government? And this is another case of mass spying with special cameras that just read OCR and save the license plate of every single car that goes by, just in case they need it someday. No warrant required. The EFF said, quote, "These systems are a combination of high-speed cameras and optical character recognition technology that can identify license plates and turn them into machine-readable text. What makes ALPR so powerful is that drivers are required by law to install license plates on their vehicles. In essence, our license plates have become tracking beacons. ALPR is a mass surveillance technology that spies on every driver on the road and logs their location, regardless of whether they are suspected of being involved in a crime." So the Institute for Justice is taking action. They announced, quote, "The launch of a nationwide campaign to push back against the arbitrary and unrestrained use of automatic license plate reader ALPR cameras in thousands of American communities. The Plate Privacy Project will combine IJ's litigation, legislation, activism, and media capabilities in the fight against warrantless mass surveillance." According to the IJ, these cameras can scan and record up to 2,000 plates per minute, which means they'll get every vehicle going by. Quote, "Once that happens, officials can search the database for any vehicle they wish, all without a warrant. And departments around the country are automatically sharing data with each other, making it simple for police anywhere to track drivers' movements. All of this arbitrary discretion threatens people's privacy, security, and freedom of movement by creating an atmosphere where everyone knows they are being watched and tracked whenever they hit the road. Nearly 90% of sheriff's offices with 500 or more deputies report using the technology, and that number goes up to 100% when looking at police departments serving over 1 million residents. And it's already being misused. In August of 2020, police officers in Colorado pulled over and arrested Brittany Gilliam and even handcuffed her daughter and nieces when an ALPR caught her plate and flagged the vehicle as stolen. Turns out, her car had Colorado plates, but the stolen vehicle had a Montana tag. Oops. A lot of the camera systems are owned and operated by Flock Safety, which has over 40,000 such cameras all over the country. According to the ACLU, quote, "Flock is building a giant camera network that records people's comings and goings across the nation, and then makes that data available for search by any of its law enforcement customers. Every new customer that buys and installs the company's cameras extends Flock's network, contributing to the creation of a centralized mass surveillance system of Orwellian scope. The IJ has already sued Norfolk, Virginia, which installed 172 ALPRs in 2023 and has announced they'll require 65 more. Their lawsuit said, quote, "Nothing in the Flock agreement or the NPD's policy requires officers to establish probable cause or obtain a warrant to access the data. And in practice, officers commonly do access the data without probable cause or a warrant. In Norfolk, no one can escape the government's 172 unblinking eyes." The district court has already denied the city's motion to dismiss, so the lawsuit will continue. Here's hoping that there are more to come. The surveillance state has been long shown to not be a benefit and cause all sorts of Orwellian harms. Just get rid of every trace of it.
If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv.
Well, those of you who are missing all the Trump versus Trudeau drama, don't worry, because we still have Trudeau-light Gavin Newsom. So to begin with, we have the redistricting going on in Texas, which, as usual, Democrats are whining about gerrymandering. They always do that when they lose seats, never when they gain. Funny about that. Remember, I'm from North Carolina. I remember what insane, crinkly districts the Democrats drew. They've been screeching about the much more reasonable districts we have now as gerrymandering because Republicans undid their blatant gerrymandering. So no, I don't take them that seriously. Neither should Texans. I looked at the history of Texas's districts when Democrats drew these long snaking districts from Austin all the way to the Mexican border and another all the way to Houston. The Democrats had enough seat in 2020 to affect the districts, and they drew the districting plan even more in their favor. Funnily enough, they didn't end up winning any new seats. The two safe districts they drew were offset by Republican wins in other districts. The new Republican plan lets Democrats keep their new safe districts, but undid a lot of the previous gerrymanders. So now, Democratic lawmakers have blocked the new plan, and the future of the redistricting is uncertain. But Newsom, ever the attention whore, saw it as an excuse to grab the headlines and gerrymander California's districts even more so than they are now.
We have got to meet fire with fire. And we've got to be held to a higher level of accountability. So that's what this is about. It's not complicated. We're doing this in reaction to a president of the United States that called a sitting governor of the state of Texas and said, "Find me 5 seats."
Gee, sound familiar? Gotta love the plays out of a failed playbook.
We will affirm our commitment to the state independent redistricting after the 2030 census, but we're asking the voters for their consent to do midterm redistricting in 2026, 2028, and 2030 for the congressional maps to respond to what's happening in Texas, to respond what Trump is trying to excite.
And it's still not occurring to anyone how closely this represents a couple of criminal mobs dividing their territory. Alright, let me explain the problem. The Supreme Court struck down racial gerrymandering, but they said that gerrymandering based on political party was a political decision that was left to the states. So the federal courts can't strike down districts on that basis. But states do have to follow the law. Article 21 of the California Constitution requires that redistricting be done by an independent citizen-led commission and not arbitrarily by the governor or the state legislature. And Section 2E says, quote, districts shall not be drawn for the purpose of favoring or discriminating against an incumbent, political candidate, or political party. In other words, Newsom has been openly advocating violating the Constitution to gerrymander California's districts. As if he hasn't made enough of a joke of himself as it is, Newsom took to social media to screech about this in all caps, I guess because he feels that's what the cool kids like about Trump. Someone should inform him that imitation is actually the sincerest form of flattery. Someone should also break the news to him that if you try to imitate someone, say, by using all caps, without understanding why that person does it and why it's so effective, you just end up looking dumb. California Congressman Ted Lieu said on X, Governor Gavin Newsom is right. If I were a Republican member of Congress in California, especially one in a swing district, I would pray that Texas doesn't engage in more gerrymandering. Of course, even when your fellow Democrats are saying it's misguided, maybe a rethink is in order. Alex Lee posted to Bluesky, gerrymandering is bad, actually, and anyone, even governors, who are proposing this are playing a dangerous game that'll further undermine democracy and further the race to the bottom of fascism. Not everyone's listening, though. Matt Ford wrote in New Republic, on this particular issue, however, the governor is unequivocally correct. Democrats should abandon their efforts to limit gerrymandering in states where they are likely to hold power for the foreseeable future. Wherever feasible, they should also roll back reforms that limit their ability to gerrymander in the first place. While it may be true that those who have backed an elimination of gerrymandering on a state-by-state basis did so with good intentions, it has had calamitous results for American democracy. I'll listen to you when you can tell me a way to tell the difference between Republican gerrymandering and Republicans undoing Democratic gerrymandering. Because really, all they're saying is, well, we lost seats. But here's the thing. There's no way to redistrict without someone being in danger of losing seats. Even if you were to do it by an impartial algorithm, there would be some gains and losses, and different algorithms might do it in different ways. So now, their recourse is to cry racism. Now again, I point out that the Supreme Court ruled against racial gerrymandering. Partisan gerrymandering is not something the federal government or Supreme Court can act against. That's up to the states to work out for themselves. So you see what the Democrats are doing? Since proportionately more blacks are Democrats, then they look at a gerrymander that loses Democrat seats and stylize it as a gerrymander against blacks, a racial gerrymander. The Supreme Court already called them out for that. All right, let's see what the other side has to say for themselves. This is Matt Margolis of PJ Media. Newsom is essentially asking voters to dismantle the very safeguards they approved to prevent this kind of political power grab. Also, Democrats can squeeze a few more safe seats out of an already one-party state. Will it work? As recent polling reveals, a significant majority of California voters prefer maintaining the state's independent redistricting commission rather than returning map-drawing power to partisan lawmakers. He linked to interactive polls on X saying that 64% of California voters prefer keeping districting independent, while only 36% back returning it to state lawmakers. Margolis wrote, if Newsom thought this stunt would make him look like a bold leader, he may end up with egg on his face instead. Californians may be deep blue voters, but they're not blind to the dangers of letting politicians carve up districts for partisan gain, especially when they voted to take that power away in the first place. In the end, Newsom's gambit could backfire spectacularly, leaving him politically bruised, California's safeguards intact, and the GOP in a stronger position heading into 2026. I don't know, somehow that feels like wishful thinking. I'm not even certain Newsom expects to win this one. It feels more like he's begun to campaign for president in 2028. Not that many people are seeming to come to the obvious conclusion, though. maybe electing politicians by district is just a bad idea to begin with. I mean, there are alternatives. You could do proportional representation. You could do like medieval Iceland and let people choose their district regardless of where they live. These alternatives and more result in fewer wasted votes, stronger representation of minority voters, and better chances for small political parties. Maybe that's why they don't like it.
I want to tell you about the eyeglasses I've been wearing for years. As people can see on my videos, I have a very strong prescription, which makes glasses more expensive, especially when I need computer glasses, reading glasses, prescription sunglasses, and most expensively, progressive lenses for general everyday wear. To save money while still getting quality glasses, I get them from Firmoo. In fact, I just got a pair of progressives with high-index aspherical lenses and a nice pair of frames my wife loves for just over $100. It would have been $500 to get them through my eye doctor. Not only do they look good, the glasses are durable. I've worn many pairs for several years without problems. All orders come with a 30-day return policy, a 3-month warranty, and one-on-one customer service. Go to Firmoo, that's FIRMOO.Bogosity.tv anytime you need quality glasses at a low price. Once again, that's Firmoo.Bogosity.tv.
And now it's time to sucralfate this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And I'm going to give it to The Guardian this week, because even though this went throughout the news media, it looks like they were at least one of the big instigators of this bit of propaganda. Trump announced that he was taking control of D.C.'s Metropolitan Police Department, citing the increases in violent crime and the city government's failure to maintain order. Quote, "The magnitude of the violent crime crisis places the District of Columbia among the most violent jurisdictions in the United States. In 2024, the District of Columbia averaged one of the highest robbery and murder rates of large cities nationwide. Indeed, the District of Columbia now has a higher violent crime, murder, and robbery rate than all 50 states." He invoked Section 740A of the Home Rule Act, the first time in history that section has been invoked, and ordered, "Effective immediately, the mayor of the District of Columbia shall provide the services of the Metropolitan Police Force for federal purposes for the maximum period permitted." Unlike the states, the Constitution gives the federal government exclusive power in the seat of the U.S. government, just as they have in forts, arsenals, and so on. Cue yet more democratic screeching. The Guardian posted, "But crime trends have dramatically changed since." In January, the Metropolitan Police Department and U.S. Attorney's Office released a report indicating that total violent crime in D.C. in 2024 was down 35% from the prior year, marking the lowest rate in over 30 years. Their headline calls Trump's claim, quote, "hyperbolic and false," and says that it, quote, "has little to do with facts." The problem is, we've known for a month that those statistics were bad. In fact, D.C. Police Commander Michael Pullum has been suspended and is under investigation for illegally altering crime statistics to make crime in the city appear lower than it is. The Fraternal Order of Police says that this is part of a broader practice of manipulating crime statistics in D.C. to show declines that just aren't happening. FOP Chairman Greg Pemberton said, quote, "That's preposterous. There's absolutely no way crime could be down 28%. Last year, they suggested that it went down 34%. He went on to explain, "When our members respond to the scene of a felony offense where there is a victim reporting that a felony occurred, inevitably there will be a lieutenant or a captain that will show up on that scene and direct those members to take a report for a lesser offense. So instead of taking a report for a shooting or a stabbing or a carjacking, they will order that officer to take a report for a theft or an injured person to the hospital or a felony assault, which is not the same type of classification. It's also not something that's a requirement of the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting Program. So by changing criminal offenses from, for example, ADW bat or ADW gun to felony assault, That would avoid both the MPD and the FBI from reporting that as a Part 1 or a felony offense. The union has been gathering this evidence for some time now. Quote, "What we've heard through our members and through members of management that were willing to talk with the union is that this is a directive from the command staff, is that they want to make sure that these classifications of these reports are adjusted over time to make sure that the overall crime stats stay down. And this is deliberately done. And the Guardian and all of these other outlets could and should have known about that. At the very least, they should have double-checked before publishing calumnious headlines attacking anyone. But when it comes to Trump, and for that matter so many others, they just don't seem to care. So all of that makes the Guardian this week's biggest Bogon emitter.
Do you have children, or nieces or nephews? Are you homeschooling, or just want to counter some of the socialist indoctrination most children get in school? If so, go to Bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins, and you'll be taken to a website where you can get some great books for elementary-age children. The Tuttle Twins books are books about liberty and free market economics that include children's versions of Bastiat's The Law, Leonard Read's I, Pencil, and Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, as well as books about the Federal Reserve and how regulations protect business cronies. They'll learn about the harm caused by eminent domain, or regulations passed in the name of safety, and fundamental concepts of liberty. And as you can see from the sample pages on the website, they're all easy to read and nicely illustrated. They're just $9.99 a piece, or get a special discount as well as free bonuses when you purchase all 5. You can even buy in bulk to donate to schools and local libraries. So get the Tuttle Twins books at Bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins.
And now let's hyper-obfuscationalificate this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. We've talked about the incredibly stupid things government will tell people after they've badly mismanaged the water supply, such as take showers instead of baths or whatever. This is a new one from the UK, though. Save water by deleting emails. Yeah, delete emails. Now, you may be wondering how emails consume water. So is everyone else with more than 2 brain cells to knock together. Here's their chain of, I can't really call it thought, but here goes. Emails are stored on data centers. Data centers use water. So fewer emails. Yeah, I still don't get it. The UK government issued a press release where Helen Wakeham, the Environment Agency's Director of Water and Chair of the National Drought Group, said, quote, "We are grateful to the public for following the restrictions where in place to conserve water in these dry conditions. Simple, everyday choices, such as turning off a tap or deleting old emails, also really helps the collective effort to reduce demand and help preserve the health of our rivers and wildlife." And you can trust her, she's an expert. And they even reiterated the bottom of the page, among things like fixing leaky toilets and taking shorter showers, quote, "Delete old emails and pictures, as data centers require vast amounts of water to cool their systems." Yeah, that's it. That's their entire reasoning. Okay, now let's really think it through. Data centers use water because they're processing things. A lot of things. That generates heat, and that means they need to be cooled, and water is used to cool them. Of course, a lot of pundits like these at 404 Media are using it to take their hits on AI, saying that AI is what's consuming all of this water. Actually, no. Training AI uses a lot of processing power, but once the AI is trained, running it actually doesn't take all that much. That's the whole point of AI. You do a whole lot of processing power now, and everyone can take advantage of it in the future. And so you can do the sum total of everything AI is used for infinitesimal amounts of power compared to what it would take otherwise. Anti-AI pundits don't understand AI? Say it ain't so. But if they were really concerned about it, why don't we see reports on how much water data centers are using to render all of this CGI for the movies? Take it from a CGI artist. Rendering uses a lot of processing power. Yet I looked and I couldn't find a single report about how much, despite all of the screeching about how much AI uses. Yeah, Avatar: The Way of Water would have used a lot of water on the AWS data centers it was rendered on. Yet I looked around and I couldn't find any published reports on how much. But it will be significant. Not just animated movies like the upcoming Toy Story 5, but even CGI-heavy live-action movies like Megan 2.0 or any given superhero movie are going to use a lot. And not just these big VFX extravaganzas. Even dramas such as The Life of Chuck have a greater VFX budget than you might think. So if they're complaining about AI, but not the next Superman movie, you really have to ask yourself why. As if the answer isn't obvious. I mean, if all this is really a problem, why not have the data center coolants double as water purification plants, or even district heating? That's not unheard of. Google's data center in Hamina, Finland, pipes its heat to local homes. And in other places in the world, data centers are used to heat swimming pools and residential hot water. They could turn this into solutions if they really wanted to. Meanwhile, we'll have to put up with idiot governments that can't manage water and idiot environmentalists who don't understand basic chemistry. Last week, we saw experts who thought that water went away forever after it evaporated. This week, we see experts who think that emails use water. What'll it be next? So all that makes the UK this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. Well, that wraps up this Release the Bore edition of the Bogosity podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please go to donate.bogosity.tv for several ways to support and discord.bogosity.tv to join the discussion. Subscribe at the Discord, Patreon, or Subscribestar, and you can listen early and ad-free. Thank you for listening. Until next time, here's a quote from Isaac Asimov. There is a cult of ignorance in the United States, and there always has been. The strain of anti-intellectualism has been a constant thread winding its way through our political and cultural life, nurtured by the false notion that democracy means that my ignorance is just as good as your knowledge. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.
Bogosity.